Alex Eala destroys Golubic. But this wasn't just another match. It was revenge, raw and personal, born from a storm that began a week ago. Last time, she walked off the court in tears, accused of weakness, mocked for losing control. But tonight, she returned with silence in her eyes and fire in her soul. Every serve carried the weight of betrayal. Every rally sounded like payback. The crowd could feel it. This wasn't competition, it was confession. Golubic tried to play mind games again, but the rules had changed. Eala wasn't chasing points anymore. She was reclaiming her pride. And when the final ball landed, the roar wasn't for victory. It was for vengeance. Because sometimes the sweetest revenge doesn't shout, it echoes. The world remembered the tears, not the match. A week ago, Alex Eala had walked off the court with her head bowed and her spirit fractured. Cameras caught the moment her hand trembled as she packed her bag, eyes avoiding Golubic's cold, victorious stare. The scoreboard had said defeat, but the whispers said humiliation. Too emotional, the commentators murmured. Still immature under pressure. Words that cut deeper than any loss. But in the quiet that followed, something inside Alex began to shift. She didn't argue, didn't post, didn't explain. Silence became her weapon. For days, she vanished from the public eye. No training footage, no interviews, no posts, just rumors. Some said she was broken, others said she was plotting her return. Both were right. Behind closed doors, Eala trained like a storm trying to remember how to reign. Every swing was heavier, every breath sharper. Her coach begged her to slow down, but she couldn't. She wasn't just preparing for another tournament. She was preparing for her reckoning. The sound of the ball striking the racket became therapy, her rhythm rewriting what was taken from her. Golubic, on the other hand, thrived on the silence. Her victory had been questioned, yes, but she played the role of the composed veteran perfectly. Smiling in interviews, she dismissed the controversy as noise. "Tennis is mental," she said lightly. "Some players handle pressure better than others." It was subtle, almost polite, but Eala heard the sting beneath those words. That quote replayed in her mind like a broken song. Some players handle pressure better than others. At night, Alex scrolled through the headlines she tried to ignore. Eala's meltdown in Madrid. Did Golubic get into her head? Future star or fading spark? Each headline became fuel. Every doubt, a spark. She wasn't angry at the world. She was angry at herself for letting it define her. Days passed like a montage of pain and purpose. The gym, the court, the mirror, her new battlegrounds. The walls echoed with her serves, each one faster, louder, angrier. In those moments, she didn't see Golubic across the net. She saw her own reflection, fragile, uncertain, desperate to break free. When the rematch was announced, same tournament series, same draw, just a week later, the tennis world lit up. Eala versus Golubic, Part 2. They called it coincidence. Eala called it fate. The night before the match, she stood on her hotel balcony, staring at the city lights. The world below was loud, alive, indifferent. But inside her, there was stillness. Not peace, just focus. She whispered the same phrase she had written on the back of her racket. "Let them talk. I'll answer on the court." Golubic, meanwhile, brushed off the buzz. "It's just another match," she told reporters with that same half-smile that had haunted Eala for days. But deep down, she felt it too, the weight of unfinished business. Because even for the composed veteran, there was something unsettling about facing a player who had been publicly broken and now returned without a word. Match morning arrived like thunder. The air around the locker room was heavy, expectant. Players whispered, cameras lingered, eyes followed Alex as she entered, headphones on, face blank, heart burning. She didn't glance at Golubic. She didn't need to. the silence between them said more than words ever could. For everyone else, it was just a rematch. For Alex Eala, it was a reckoning written in sweat and memory, because revenge doesn't start when the first ball is hit. It starts the moment you decide not to be the same person who lost. The stadium felt different that day. Louder, brighter, hungrier. Every fan in the stands sensed it. This wasn't just tennis. It was unfinished business. Alex Eala walked onto the court first, her gaze forward, her jaw locked. The roar of the crowd barely touched her. She didn't wave, didn't smile. Her focus was so sharp it could cut glass. Across the net, Golubic made her entrance, calm as ever, carrying that same quiet confidence that had once broken Eala's composure. But this time, something about her smile looked forced. When the umpire called play, time seemed to slow. The ball left Eala's hand and cracked against the court like thunder. Her first serve, an ace. The sound of it drew gasps, even from those who had doubted her. Golubic nodded slightly as if to say, "All right, let's play." But Eala wasn't playing anymore. She was executing. Each rally was war disguised as rhythm. Golubic tried to drag her into long exchanges, probing for weakness, waiting for emotion to take over. But Eala had learned. Her footwork was ruthless, her timing precise. No screams, no frustration, just quiet fury. The crowd started to shift. Where once they had pitied her, now they were captivated. Every point she won felt like a confession, a retelling of what happened last week, rewritten one forehand at a time. By the end of the first set, Eala led 6-3. The scoreboard showed numbers, but the eyes of everyone watching saw something deeper. Transformation. She wasn't the same girl who had broken down under pressure. She was colder now, but stronger, a storm with control. Between sets, Golubic sat stone-faced, towel over her shoulders, trying not to meet Eala's eyes. The commentators whispered about tension. Some said Golubic looked shaken. Others thought Eala's emotionless calm was more intimidating than anger ever could be. Whatever it was, the energy had shifted, and Golubic could feel the court slipping away from her. The second set began, and Golubic came alive. She started slicing deep, changing pace, throwing off rhythm. Experience spoke through every shot. She pushed Eala wide, made her run, tested her patience. At 3-3, the rallies turned brutal. 10, 15, 20 shots. Sweat poured, lungs burned, but neither yielded. Then came the moment that froze the crowd. A tight rally ended with Golubic's forehand landing near the baseline, called out. She challenged instantly. The replay showed it had caught the line, barely. The point was hers, but the damage was done. Eala glared across the net, memories flooding back. The bad calls, the timeouts, the gamesmanship that haunted her from the last match. For a second, the past threatened to break through the calm, but instead of anger, she smiled, cold, knowing. The kind of smile that says, "Not this time." When play resumed, she unleashed something different. Her shots became heavier, her rhythm quicker. It was as if the ghost of last week had been exorcised right there in front of thousands. The tension became electric. Golubic started rushing, trying to regain control, but Eala didn't blink. Every serve, every return carried intent. At 5-4, with Eala serving for the match, the entire stadium stood. The silence before the serve was deafening. She bounced the ball once, twice, 3 times. Her eyes locked on Golubic. Then, boom, ace, match point. The sound was pure release. Golubic barely moved for the final ball. A forehand ripped down the line, untouchable. The crowd erupted as Eala dropped her racket, eyes closed, breathing heavy but calm. No celebration, no scream, just stillness. Because in that silence, everyone knew. This wasn't a win. It was a statement. And sometimes revenge doesn't shout, it whispers, "I told you so." The air in the stadium was heavy, the kind that feels electric before lightning strikes. The scoreboard might have shown Alex Eala leading, but inside both players, something much more volatile was unfolding. This was no longer just a tennis match. It had become a test of control, ego, and endurance. Golubic wasn't done yet. Even after losing the first set, she refused to fold. She adjusted, sharpened her rhythm, and started forcing errors out of Eala. Small ones, but enough to break the flow. At 2-1 in the second set, Golubic broke serve. Her fist pumped, her eyes finally alive with defiance. "Let's see how calm she really is," she muttered under her breath. The crowd sensed the change. The match, once one-sided, was now trembling on the edge. Eala's calm expression didn't crack, but her breathing deepened, her grip tightened. The ghosts of last week were trying to claw back in. A few points later, controversy struck, the kind of moment that can change an entire game. Eala's forehand down the line clipped the tape and bounced out. The umpire called it out instantly, but replay showed it might have grazed the line. Eala stared in disbelief. She raised her hand for a challenge, but the system glitched. "Challenge not available," the umpire said flatly. The crowd erupted in boos. Eala's lips parted slightly, her composure teetering. Golubic smirked. "Play on," she said softly, knowing exactly what that moment would do. For a heartbeat, Eala's silence cracked. She turned her back to the net, eyes closed, forcing the storm inside her to quiet down. Her coach's voice echoed from the stands. "Stay here, Alex. Stay in it." And she did. The next rally lasted 26 shots. Golubic threw everything: slices, topspin, angles. But Eala countered step for step, refusing to retreat. The point ended with a forehand winner that left even Golubic staring in disbelief. The crowd rose, the noise deafening. Eala clenched her fist, not in rage, but in affirmation. That was the breaking point, not of the match, but of fear itself. Golubic began unraveling next. Her timing slipped, her serves drifted long. Every time Eala won a point, she walked back with the same expression, blank, unshaken. That calm had turned from vulnerability to intimidation. It wasn't the fire of anger that fueled her now. It was precision born of pain. At 5-3, Eala stood just one game away from victory. The crowd buzzed with tension, sensing the end. But Golubic wasn't ready to be erased. She played one of her best games yet, saving 2 match points, drawing applause even from Eala's fans. The match had turned from sport into drama. Each point a story, each breath a gamble. Then came the moment no one could forget. On the next rally, Golubic sent a high lob deep into Eala's corner. Alex chased it, sliding, stretching, and somehow firing back a cross-court backhand that kissed the line. Winner, game, match. Golubic dropped her racket. The stadium exploded. Eala didn't celebrate. She stood still, eyes fixed on the spot where the ball had landed, the same line she wasn't allowed to challenge minutes earlier. It felt poetic, almost cruel, but perfectly just. As she walked to the net, Golubic extended her hand. Eala took it, her grip firm, her eyes steady. No words exchanged, just understanding. The kind that only comes when two players have seen the best and worst of each other. When Eala looked up at the crowd, she didn't smile. She just exhaled, a deep, quiet breath that carried weeks of frustration, pain, and rebirth. The storm had broken, and in its calm she finally stood taller than the silence that once defeated her. The sound of the final point still echoed when Alex Eala walked back to her chair. The crowd was still standing, still shouting her name, but she barely heard them. Her mind was somewhere else, trapped between disbelief and release. She had done it. She had rewritten the ending that haunted her for a week. Golubic sat across the court, towel over her head, still processing what had just happened. She wasn't humiliated, just stunned. She had seen Eala break before, crumble under pressure, but this time the young player stood unshaken. It wasn't power that defeated her. It was composure. And that realization burned quietly beneath her calm expression. Eala picked up her bag and glanced toward the scoreboard one last time. 6-3. 4. Simple numbers, yet each one carried a story, a week's worth of humiliation. Doubt and sleepless nights. She didn't jump. She didn't scream. She just closed her eyes and whispered, "Finally." The interviewer caught her courtside, microphone trembling from the energy in the arena. "Alex," the reporter began, "after everything that happened last week, What does this win mean to you? Eala paused. For a moment, it looked like she might refuse to answer. Then, with a soft voice that barely carried through the noise, she said, "It means I didn't let anger win. I turned it into something else." Those words cut through the stadium louder than the cheers. Because everyone knew this wasn't just about beating Golubic. It was about reclaiming herself. Revenge, after all, isn't always about destruction. Sometimes it's about balance. Golubic approached after the interview, extending her hand again, this time with genuine respect. "You played like a champion," she said quietly. Eala nodded, expression unreadable. There was no hate left, no bitterness, just clarity. The war between them had ended, not with violence, but with understanding. Back in the locker room, Eala sat alone for a long time. The adrenaline began to fade and exhaustion crept in. But there was peace in that exhaustion, the kind that comes after surviving something that once broke you. She took out her phone and opened social media. Notifications flooded in, fans calling it the greatest revenge arc in tennis, clips of her calm victory replaying in slow motion. But she didn't post anything. She just smiled faintly and turned off the screen, because for the first time she didn't need validation. Her silence said enough. Later, as she left the arena, a few young fans called her name. She turned, waved briefly, then kept walking, into the tunnel, into whatever came next. That night, the headlines read, "Eala's redemption, revenge served silent." But to her, it wasn't revenge anymore. It was evolution. She hadn't destroyed Golubic, she'd destroyed the version of herself that once doubted she belonged, and that's the real victory. No scoreboard can measure. Because when you've been broken and rise without rage, the world doesn't just see your comeback. It feels your peace. The night after the match, the city outside the hotel pulsed with energy. Reporters, fans, and cameras filled the streets, each desperate to capture the story everyone was talking about, Alex Eala's revenge. But up in her quiet hotel room, away from the noise, Alex sat on the balcony staring into the night sky. For the first time in weeks, her heart wasn't racing. It was steady, calm. She replayed the match in her mind. The points, the silence, the final moment when the ball hit the line and everything stopped. But what echoed louder than the crowd was the stillness that followed. It wasn't joy. It wasn't triumph. It was release. The kind that only comes when you've carried something heavy for too long and finally let it go. Down below, screens flashed her name in headlines. Eala redeems herself. Revenge complete. The return of the rising star. But she didn't see herself in those words anymore. The girl they were writing about, the one who had broken down last week, who had cried under bright lights, that girl was gone. What remained wasn't revenge-driven fire. It was something quieter, stronger. In another part of the hotel, Golubic gave her post-match interview. Her voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed something softer. "She deserved this," she said. "People talk about rivalry, about controversy, but what happened tonight was growth. We both needed it." The honesty in her tone surprised everyone, even herself. For the first time, she wasn't defending or dismissing. She was acknowledging the next morning. Clips from the match flooded social media. Slow-motion replays of Eala's match point. The silent handshake at the net and that one rare smile when she looked toward the crowd. Fans filled comment sections with emotion. She didn't just win, she healed. This is what redemption looks like. She turned her pain into poetry. Eala read a few of them, then closed her phone. She didn't need to read more. She knew what she had done, not to Golubic, but for herself. Her coach found her later that day at the empty practice court. She stood alone, racket in hand, hitting soft forehands under the morning sun. No cameras, no crowd, no noise. Just rhythm, her language of peace. "You're not done, are you?" he asked gently. She smiled faintly. "No, this is just the beginning." The revenge that once consumed her had transformed into something else. Purpose. She wasn't chasing anyone anymore. She wasn't proving anything. She was becoming who she was meant to be. Weeks later, when the footage of that match was replayed on highlight reels, commentators would still call it the revenge game. But those who watched closely, who saw her eyes after the final point, knew better. That wasn't revenge. That was rebirth, because true power isn't found in destroying someone else. It's found in rebuilding yourself and walking away without looking back. And as Alex Eala disappeared down that tunnel, the crowd still chanting her name, one question lingered in the air like the echo of her serve. Was this the end of a rivalry? Or the beginning of a legend? And just like that, the storm passed. Alex Eala didn't just defeat Golubic, she defeated the version of herself that once broke under pressure. What began as revenge became redemption. What started with anger ended in peace. The crowd saw victory, but those who truly watched saw rebirth. Because in the end, revenge fades, but evolution lasts forever. As the lights dimmed and the echoes of her final serve faded into history, one truth remained clear. Greatness isn't built in the spotlight. It's built in the silence that follows. And for Alex Eala, that silence spoke louder than any cheer ever could. If you felt this story, if you believe that strength is born from struggle, subscribe and stay with us as we uncover more untold stories of tennis, rivalry, and redemption, because this was just the beginning.